All right, with it being 5 o'clock, we'll officially call the meeting to order. Is the meeting been properly posted and rolled and taken?
Yes.
Thank you. Item number 2, 2.1 is minutes from the May 3rd Planning Commission meeting. If there's no additions or corrections, I'd go ahead and entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Item number 3 is communications. Do we have any communications this evening? So we'll move on to item number 4, which is public hearing, review, and possible recommendation regarding Allen Mansion LLC. At this time, I'd go ahead and open the public hearing. And would staff like to get us started?
Yeah, so we have Peter here tonight, over at 511 East Walworth Avenue. He's looking for a few different things that require conditional uses. He's got indoor sales or service, indoor institutional, indoor-outdoor commercial entertainment, and vacation rental home as the land uses that he's asking for today. He is here tonight in case you guys have some questions, because some of these things are a little open-ended with what he's asking for. So with that, I'll let Peter take the mic. If you have any questions for him,
Hello, everyone.
Hello?
Hello, Mr. Ryan.
Did you just want to explain a little bit?
Oh, sure. Well, so main areas of passion for me, education and preservation, being the owner of the most significant building left in Delavan. I consider it a great honor to be the steward of the property and have it as my home. But we are interested in a public component aspect to the house, as it would remain my residence, but the occasional public access through some very controlled and timed public events are something that we are interested in exploring so that we can continue to educate the public on the values of preservation, the history of Delavan and the Allen Mansion and the family that originally created the home. So I know it's a little bit more, a little bit more confusing perhaps than, your standard 4 walls and I want to sell things out of it, which is not what I'm interested in doing. I'm interested in presenting the home in controlled events, which will occasionally be paid events. Or yeah, I dare say even events, because we're not talking large gatherings, but there's specific questions.
Yeah, any questions from commissioners? Yes, what?
Thanks for being here tonight, Peter. And as I understand it, you are, that will be your full-time resident.
Correct.
Can you give us a little more of a rundown of an explanation of what kind of events you're anticipating would be held there?
Sure. One of the areas that we're most interested in starting with is our small paid historical tours, and those would consist of small groups of people who we would steward through the house and sort of explain the architectural significance, the history of the house, the history of Delavan, the arts and crafts that went into the creation of it, and the ongoing preservation efforts and why preservation is important. So those would be very small and would be, I see them happening in blocks of time at very specific times throughout the year. They wouldn't be all the time. They would be occasional, they would be posted, and it would be windows of time. Other thing particularly interested in, as I am a professional performer, one of the aspects is potential indoor musical performances. what I would call salons, which would be small gatherings, possibly a speaker, possibly a small ensemble, possibly an acoustic singer. So it would all be acoustic instruments. It would be contained. As I can blast my music in the house, you'd never hear it if it's so well built. So it wouldn't create a disturbance. My neighbors wouldn't even hear it. But it would again be very small and very contained because the house. My first concern is protecting the property and the preservation of it. Another would be a potential very small and selective special events, which might include a possible catered dinner. We have a large dining room. The table can seat around 12 to 15 people. So it would never be bigger than that. And it would, I envision, possibly soliciting an artisan chef, working with local growers. We wouldn't be interested in installing a commercial kitchen in the home. So I have had made a relationship with the church next door, which our two properties have long been linked, going back to the 1880s. And they have a commercial kitchen, which they have said that occasionally through, if it was prearranged, we could possibly use that. So if we were ever to do something like that, we would be able to prepare food in their commercial kitchen and then basically just cater and bring it over and then present a small public dinner possibly. And then the one that I'm potentially least interested in, but would like to at least explore, would be the overnights. I know in the past people have known of the house as a bed and breakfast, not interested in that, not interested in preparing food for guests, not interested in strangers coming, going, and sleeping in the house, but very possibly maybe a small retreat might happen where we might have a collection of artists who are doing visual art or quilting or some type of maybe even possibly a meditative event, for example. So we would have possibly 4 to 5 bedrooms that would be available for very specific blocks of time. All those people would be pre-screened and predetermined. They wouldn't be random. And I would always be in the home to welcome them, to guide them, and I would have a relationship with them in some capacity, but there would be a possible financial transaction in that sense. But it wouldn't be every night. It would be very occasional blocks of time, maybe a Saturday here and there, maybe a Saturday and a Sunday here and there, but very small and limited in those events. And then, the possible occasional things like a small garden gathering where you might have some beverages of some sort, a garden walk, possibly a possible outdoor tea service, but nothing of large gathering, nothing loud or amplified or any of that sort.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Any other questions for Peter, commissioners? Anyone, thanks, Peter. Anyone else at this time that wishes to speak on the matter or ask a question?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that we do have Jackie via Zoom today. She's kind of replacing Mike Slavny eventually as he's retiring. So I don't know if she has anything that she wants to add or if you had any questions for her. Can you hear us, Jackie?
I can hear you, yes. I felt that, T, I felt like you covered it really well. Your memo does outline the various land uses that, there's a lot going on that's proposed for the Allen Mansion. And I think you covered all of the different land use categories that would be addressed through the zoning ordinance. I think one comment that Mike and I had when we were reviewing it was just to be aware of when events are being had, to be aware of parking on site. So based on the zoning requirements for parking and based on the amount of parking that's available on site, generally events would be limited to about 45 guests based on the amount of parking that's available on site. However, I did hear that Peter had mentioned that they could perhaps make arrangements for parking with the neighboring property. I think it was through the church. And so if I would just recommend that if it was expected to have events of 45 or more regularly, that the city would probably want to see something in writing about that parking arrangement, just so that we could be assured that parking spillover would not be an issue.
Did I understand you believe that the property currently would allow for 45 parking spaces?
No, it's, let me clarify that. So there are 15 parking spaces on site, and based on the operations of the Allen Mansion that they're proposing, those 15 spaces would be suitable for an event of 45 people. So it's assuming some people are carpooling, some people are not driving. But that would kind of be the cap on events based on the availability of parking on site.
Mark, is the parking allowed that side street?
On Walworth Avenue, yes.
Question probably for T, occupancy.
Yeah, so Jen and I actually, I haven't been in the Allen Mansion yet. It's something that we would probably have to go in and look at to actually get an occupancy. But of course, if he's doing things outside too, I think he probably would be fine with that number. But I would have to get in there to actually see what the occupancy, and I don't know, Peter, do you know, has that building ever been given an occupancy in the past?
I'm assuming it has, through the previous owner because of the use that they had, but they always lived on site as well. I mean, the house is approximately 10,000 square feet, and it does contain 11 bedrooms, so.
That is something that the city, however, will do and advise.
Yeah, that is something that actually the fire department and myself could go over there and get an occupancy based on what he's, a lot of the occupancies is kind of based on the uses, and he has a lot of different uses as to what he's doing. So, but we could, Jennifer O'Neill and myself could come up with a number for that.
Does this type of operation require any specific fire regulations?
They do require certain exits, which I do believe that they do have. But that would be something that we could look at too when we went over there to look at the occupancy.
No, sprinkling is not a requirement.
No.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I believe so. Is anyone else at this time like to speak?
Hello, my name is William DeWitt. I live at 524 Dell Street. And I read Peter's explanation on the back of his plat map. And I certainly don't have any problems with the arts and the museum that he wants to do going forward. And his explanation of small groups and quaint music and all that. My concern is the weddings and special events. And the fact that you're extending entertainment to the outside of the building. And I also need a clarification about liquor license. Does he have a liquor license?
No, I do not.
So the next question is, at weddings, is it going to be a bring your own event? In other words, can they bring alcoholic beverages to this event? And I know the music can't be amplified, but I would still think it backs up to a single family quiet residency. And I don't really want to, I mean, I live in that area. I really don't want to violate that space. So I would think if you're going to allow special events, we at least put a time frame on, they must end by 9 p.m. I just have some concerns about I know he mentions quaint and he says small gatherings, but you know, he's got a limit of 45 people. And if he makes an agreement with the church next door or even the accountant place next door, that his capacity increases quite a bit, so I had some concerns about noise and activity. Thank you.
I don't know if you want to address any of that,
Sure,
Peter, maybe
absolutely.
specifically the weddings or.
No, I certainly take very seriously the residential nature of the area. I mean, but we are in a sort of mixed zone. And also for myself, again, my first concern is the preservation of the building. So I'm not interested in events or individuals that put at risk my investment and my preservation of the building. So I certainly wouldn't advocate for my own self for events that would put at risk the property or my relationships with my neighbors, whom I have a very close relationship with. I do have a very close conversational relationship with all the people that surround me, and am happy to talk with them about any of the events that we would do and make sure that there weren't any concerns. And as it is very important to maintain my relationship with the church, for example, as those buildings have always been very intimately linked, I would certainly always have conversation with them about any of the things that we would do. And certainly as they have reached out to me and said that they would be interested in allowing the use of their parking lot and possibly their commercial kitchen in a very organized and determined events, and occasional. I mean, these would not be frequent. It wouldn't be like we would be doing these every weekend, for example. I don't want to do that, and it's not in the interest of the building, the property. And I do take very seriously the my neighbors' well-being and those types of things. So I do have two single-family homes right behind me, and then I'm surrounded by the church on my eastern side, or western side, and eastern side is a business that operates under normal business hours. So I would take those types of things into consideration.
And although you don't currently have a liquor license, you are willing to pursue at least the beer or wine.
Yeah, so I'm again not interested in the hard liquor component of it. It puts too much risk on, again, the property and myself. So I'm interested in, like I said, with the possible small dinners. People do like have a possible glass of wine or a single beer with a meal. So I'm interested in the possibility of pursuing that in its fashion, but certainly not interested in selling liquor. And just want to make sure that component has it financially makes sense so it's alcohol serving. There's plenty of opportunities for that in this town and all towns. So that's not a priority for me. Priority is the education, the arts component, and people's enjoyment and an elevated cultural experience.
Steve?
Just to.
Yeah, does this agreement allow for him to rent out the property? And if so, how does that work?
Jackie, did you want to take that?
Sorry, was that directed at me?
Well, I just wondered if you wanted to address the renting of the room per se.
Or the renting of the property, for a group?
Oh, okay, so, well, in the application that we received, I didn't see any mention of that. But you're thinking about perhaps if they rented a room out to an organization to hold a meeting or something like that?
Or to have a gathering there, a group that wanted to have a gathering, can they rent that property under this agreement?
I think we would want it to be spelled out by the applicant, but I can't think of them offhand. I can't think of anything in zoning that would prevent them from doing that.
So Stephanie, so you're suggesting that the zoning that's being applied for here would allow the petitioner to rent the entire property for, say, multiple days?
I would have to look at that. That's certainly not what they asked to do under this application. So I would have to take a quick look at the code and see if that would fall, what land use that would fall under. I mean, if it's an overnight situation, we would treat it as we would treat a hotel, which would be a different land use, so that would not be permitted. If we're talking about a conference over the course of a weekend, I'd have to think about that, but that's not what was proposed.
Just for clarification, at least for myself, how would this be maybe different, what he's pursuing than what it was for a number of years when it was a bed and breakfast and it was being rented out potentially every night, or there could be at some point, under the previous owner? How would this be different, what he's wanting to do, than what the bed and breakfast was for a number of years? I'm just trying to understand that.
And that question's for me.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. So my understanding is that the previous owner was operating a bed and breakfast, which would mean they were on site when guests were present. They were responsible for serving at least one meal, breakfast, and that they rented multiple rooms out at different times year round. And to me, this sounds like what the applicant is proposing is more of a event venue that has a number of different things going on, including perhaps historical tours, educational sessions, occasional small group events. And to me, it sounds like the overnight stays would be very sporadic and organized around specific groups. So a retreat, or maybe a small wedding party or something like that, but not individual guests with no relation to one another that you may find in an Airbnb, or excuse me, in a bed and breakfast situation where you have different people from all over the country coming who don't know each other, staying under one roof, whereas this would be cohesive groups there for a single purpose. I don't know if I captured that correctly, Peter, but that's my understanding of how it's different from the previous owner.
That was a great explanation, thank you.
A clarification, T, there's currently no class of liquor license attached to this property?
Correct. That's something that Peter's looking at doing in the future, maybe. But currently there is not one.
You are thinking that potentially in the future you would be requesting some type of a liquor license?
Yeah, we would just be looking into the occasional serving of wine and beer. And I'm not versed super well in the legal aspects of that. I'm exploring that now, but that's not a priority for the things that I'm hoping to do. And I certainly, there's a certain culture of drinking that I'm not interested in the property. So my interest in pursuing that would be just in the service of an event, but not as a offering in itself.
I mean, speak, I understand I understand what Peter is trying to do, but my concern is, what does the ordinance allow him to do? And that's where my concern falls in.
Right.
Is he to rent the entire property out under this current condition, this request, to a wedding of 40 people? And if he's allowed to do that, means he can then do that. And that's where my concern falls in. It's not what Peter is telling me what he wants to do, and we have to believe that's what he wants to do. but the ordinance says I can also do this.
Right.
Thanks. Peter, and I was also gonna call, I didn't know if you wanted to address any of the specific ordinance.
Did you want
Oh,
to-
I just want to say that I would always be on site for the events. As a steward of it and, overseeing the things. So there would never be an outside event that would not be, observed and sort of handled in a meaningful way, so.
I can jump in. Thank you for clarifying your question. William, I think I understand now what the question is. So under the ordinance, vacation rental home land uses may rent out either part of the dwelling unit or the entire building. So that would be, if we were to approve that land use, that would be permitted under the ordinance. However, the Plan Commission could add conditions to this conditional use permit if you wanted to limit that to a certain number of bedrooms or number of guests or anything else that you felt was relevant to the operations of this property.
And the other thing with this conditional use is a limited conditional use, which would go to Peter. So if he was to sell this, or owners were to change, the new owner would have to come in to get conditional uses, because it goes away if Peter goes away. I do understand Bruce DeWitt's concerns with the outside, so that might be something that you guys want to consider with a time frame of things being outside. Nothing's being amplified, so there aren't speakers or anything like that, but if things are going to go late into the night, I can understand how that would be a problem. So that might be something that you guys, it didn't really seem like he was against that, but that might be something that you guys want to look at, because that's not spelled out in the approvals that we have it written, the way that they're written.
It's been a while, but it seems to me that city's current zoning says that sound and vibrations can't move from one zoning area to another. So we have the zoning of this property next to residential. And maybe Stephanie's a better person to ask this question of.
Jack?
Does that in fact mean that loud noises and vibrations can't propagate over into the residential zone areas?
I think the city's policy on this has been to limit the use of amplified sound rather than trying to contain all sound onto a specific property. At least that's what's been done in the past for other outdoor commercial uses like this.
Unless it's changed, I believe that there was an ordinance that said that noise and vibration can't extend over into a different zoning district.
I can take a quick look at that. I will say that there is different zoning to the north of this property, so that would be kind of the area of concern. But most other properties on the same street are all zoned office neighborhood. So the main area of concern would be just to the north.
There is something in number 6, but it relates to business, not necessarily residential, as far as sound.
Number 6.
Certainly could add residential to that if you wanted to.
Are you referring to the report in the meeting packet?
Yeah,
He's referring to the
recommended conditional uses. Yeah, you could add, residential to the business part of that, I suppose. To handle that.
And I do think that the fact that what he's gonna be doing out there is not gonna be allowed to be amplified. In my opinion, I think it's more of an issue of a time frame, most likely, than, unless he's got huge drums out there that he's just beating on all day or something. But I would say for the most part, it's more of a time frame issue.
I think that was a request limiting that I heard,
Mhm.
9 o'clock or something.
Yeah, I believe that was the time that Bruce said. Was 9 o'clock, and he is one of the residents, so that lives there, so that might be something that you would want to consider to put in there.
Is there maybe another issue, another example you can give where, or is this so unique that there's no other example? I mean, do we limit it to 9 o'clock in other residential areas? I was thinking more like 10 myself, but I think there's a lot of events that go a little bit beyond 9 o'clock. That's just my opinion. And I mean, I live right across the bowling alley, for example. I know they do events over there, not as much as they used to because they're still working on getting. So I'm just, would
I
this
don't think that
be
we-
solely unique?
Yeah, I think in this example, this is a pretty unique example, so, I mean, I think that you have the.
I mean,
you have the owner and
Peter,
the
it's not my
residents.
property, so I don't wanna speak for, if you're good with 9 o'clock, that's great, but I know I go to a lot of events and they don't necessarily end right at 9, that's just my.
I was basing on the music we have in the park, music in the park drops at 9 o'clock. That's where we got that. Now, it wasn't,
No set for.
that's where we got it from. I didn't really think about it. I just, well, the park closes down at 9.
Sure,
You know, when they have music in the park. And
Yeah.
I'm sure the residents around appreciate that,
Yeah.
even though the music's great.
And
I was just there, don't do it.
they amplify it a little bit more, I think, too.
That's for our outdoor events, right, the 9 o'clock, and as opposed to indoor events.
Correct, that's dealing with the sound outside, yes.
I have one more request. I like the fact that he said he'd always be on premise. And I would love to see that as a conditional use in, or conditional
Part of
use permit. Because that certainly puts a flavor on 909. I had the speaker, I don't know if you can hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you, but it's probably still better to have. We've been through
He
this.
mentioned that he would always be on site for all events, and I think that's a great suggestion from him, and I think you should put that in the conditional use as well, because that certainly controls what happens on property.
Anyone else that wishes to speak on the matter at this time? Seeing and hearing none, I will officially close the public hearing and move on to 4.2, which is review of possible recommendation. The common council regarding a petition for a conditional use permit to allow for indoor sale or service, indoor institutional, indoor outdoor commercial entertainment, and vacation rental home land uses at 511 East Wall Avenue, tax parcel XWUP 00101, located in the office neighborhood, ON zoning district, applicant Allen Mansion LLC. What is the commission's pleasure? Care to make a motion?
I'll take a step. I would move that the commission recommend to council the conditional use finding that they have listed in the minutes with the recommendations that are also provided, and to include additional recommendations. One, that the owner be on site of all events, and two, that outside sound be limited to 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. And that's why
There is a motion, there is a second to that.
I'll second that.
There's a motion and a second, any further discussion?
I just have an explanation on indoor institutional. What does that mean?
I can take that. That land use was included because that's what we use to capture the kind of museum side of the operation. So the historic tours and preservation workshops. That land use doesn't really trigger any additional requirements, but we felt like that was distinct from the indoor commercial entertainment land use.
Thank you.
One thing I might suggest to the planning commission is that I didn't see in our conditions of approval that this would be a limited conditional use permit, as T mentioned. So we may want to add a condition that the permit be limited to the current owner.
it is listed in.
Is there? Okay. My apologies.
Issuance of a limited conditional use.
Great, thank you.
I believe that was how it was addressed as well, limited to the present owner.
So we have a motion and a second, any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by stating aye. Aye. Sign, motion passes. Thanks, Peter.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Bruce. All right. Moving on to item number 5, business. Any other business issues? So moving on to item number 6 would be an update on building and zoning related matters. Team?
I don't know if you guys have any specific questions. I was up at the high school today. They're moving along there, so it was nice to see them doing some work up there and hopefully get done in the fall so we can have some football games up there. We still have, let's see, I think I've got at least one new single family home on my desk, so I think we're at like 13 new single family homes for the year. Lumber prices keep going up, but people keep building, so I'm definitely busy. I got lots of people building sheds and decks, and yeah, we've got things are moving. And I was over at Harbor Freight today. They're hoping to be done in about a month, so they're moving along also. So those are kind of school and Harbor Freight are kind of the bigger ones that I have going right this minute.
Anything new on the other part of that building?
So the actual, we don't have anything going in there yet. We do have some interest, or we do have some people that are looking to do some other things in the smaller units, but not in the actual Shopko building. So,
When I know, T, you're aware of this, but for the benefit of the commission, I know I had a couple of people reach out to me with concerns and complaints about the downtown hotel and some of the conditions there, and I've reached out to you. I know you had some people inquiring about that. Maybe you want to just give an update, I think that fits under the parameters of this, just where we're at with that, because I haven't gotten any more since.
sure. Yeah, so I do know that Shannon Markley's been following up with Sean Patel, the owner there. I believe that he has until June 15th to fix a few of the things that are wrong over there. I do believe that he gave her a call and said that he was going to be done with those things before the 15th. So I think she might actually be going there this Thursday to look at some of the things over there. So.
Thanks for that update. Any other questions as it relates to updates?
Maybe the downtown, the work on that park by the elephant.
Yeah, so they're looking at a fall completion date, right? Yeah, October, so I believe that they still are, they're still hoping to meet that deadline. I know the weather's been good for them, so they haven't been falling behind on that. And they've got some of the pergolas up that you can probably see in one of the fountains. So they're moving right along, and the building underneath the water tower is kind of all framed up and bricked up, so.
If there's no additional questions, we'll move on to item number 7, which is adjourn. I entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to approve.
So motion, a second. All in favor of adjournment, signify by stating aye. Anyone opposed? No.